Hi there, and welcome to my podcast or video, depending on however you are listening or watching to this footage, about my session at Emerce Digital Marketing Live last Thursday in Amsterdam. I am going to talk about getting success in SEO without a focus on SEO or keywords. And I actually had a few different titles. So my first title was SEO without focus on keywords and SEO. But then a lot of things happened in the world of SEO. So I was thinking of rename it to SEO as a result of doing the right things. And my other idea and last idea was transforming from SEO to organic marketing, because I think there is so much happening right now that a focus on SEO alone cannot be enough anymore to make a business case and to make sure you're ranking high and achieve visibility. But I will take you through my session, and let's start at the beginning. This is me. My name is Chantalsmink. I am an SEO expert for 13 years now, started in 2010. I am writing for Dutch websites, just like Marketing Facts, the magazine Marketing Tribune, and I've also written an article for Emerce. Last year, I published my first book about SEO and content strategies. I have a complete e-learning training on my new approach to SEO, which is completely focused on people first, so human-centric, or as I called it at that time, horizontal SEO, where you can rank on as many search terms as you want. I have created 2 e-magazines, one for jobs and one for e-commerce. And I have a podcast at Spotify, and I'm active on Instagram. So a lot of places where you can find me. This is an article I published just 1 week before my session at Emerce. And the title is "Content Shouldn't Be the Responsibility of the SEO Department Anymore." I published it at Marketing Facts, which is a quite large and well-known marketing platform in the Netherlands. And I talked about why I think that creation of content shouldn't be the responsibility of the SEO department anymore. And it has to do with a lot of increasing demands from Google. Google wants more from us than the SEO department can deliver. And I think that we also need to find another motivation to create content. And I will talk about this during this session. But let's go back to where it all started, because there are some problems we are facing within SEO. So here you see some snippets from various websites about what Google has been saying about SEO. And I think there are several interesting remarks here. So it's of course the hidden gems, the EEAT, that EAT applies to every single query. But I think these 3 are the most important things to have attention for. It's Google says ton of SEOs and websites produce terrible content, not worth indexing. But also the site-wide ranking signal to target search engine first content. But also Google saying that writing content from keyword lists will result in mediocre content. And I think that everyone who has ever written content for SEO can agree on this part. When we're writing from a keyword list, we're also writing the obvious things that we come up with ourselves. And most of the times it matters more to us that the content is actually there. And it's not that important for us that the content is good enough. So the bar is set at, can this rank in Google? And the bar is not set on, is this good enough for our audience to read? But we have another problem, and that is the way we work in SEO. Here you see that we're doing keyword research, and we found the word apple pie. So a lot of search volume on that keyword. And what's happening more or less all the time is that people say, okay, I am going to write a piece of content for this keyword, in this case, a recipe for an apple pie. I put it online, I publish it, and then we're going to sit and wait for SEO traffic. And what happens is that we have 400 million pages of apple pie in the index of Google. So I think 400 million is actually quite a lot. The first thing, because I'm coming back at this at a later point, but the first thing I want to say about this is with 400 million results, why do we even bother to actually create 400 million and one? I think that's a lot of effort we have to put in for it. And what can we expect from this? And it makes me think of SEO like this. This is what we see in Asia, where people are crowding into a train, and this is what we do with SEO. We all want to enter that one train, that one keyword, and rank for it. And I think this would work, and had been working years ago. I have done it myself, but SEO is so crowded at the moment. Everyone is optimizing for SEO. Everyone wants something out of SEO. So this cannot be the way we work anymore. So that's what I said. I think the road is ending. The way we are working in SEO is ending. With the 3 problems I just discussed, we cannot keep on doing what we always have been doing. And Google's also saying this in the helpful content guidelines. When you are creating content, you should ask yourself 3 questions. Who created the content? How did you create the content? And why? And they say that the why is actually one of the most important questions you should ask yourself. Because if the why is to rank in Google, that is not the kind of content they want to rank and their algorithms want to show. So I think this is something we should be really very clear about and know about. And because for SEO, we are all writing for SEO. And I have been very surprised that with the announcement of Google Bard or generative search in Google, the people have been saying, well, it's not worthwhile anymore to create content for SEO or to create content at all. And I think I was really flabbergasted by this. Is this the only reason we create content? Is that for SEO? Don't we have another reason to invest in good content? Don't we think there is more to it than SEO only? And I think this shows what you have to change and why we have to change it. But I will come back at this at a later point. And then we have a third problem. And here you already see a screenshot of Dan Taylor, who said this. But also Google said it themselves. The web is actually infinite. There are so many URLs and pages, they cannot crawl and index it anymore. All. So they have to make assumption what is actually worth crawling and indexing. And people have been asking John Mueller a lot of questions about this. And he always says, well, awesomeness, awesomeness, and awesomeness. And I think this is actually very interesting and underrated. Not that much people are talking about this. And I think that's actually a shame. Because this is another reason why we need to stop creating content for SEO. And what I want to show you is, for example, with the 400 million pieces for apple pie recipes, it's actually very funny that Google is still indexing it. Because indexing is not free. You need a data center, you need hardware, you need energy, you need water, you need software, electricity. So indexing is actually quite expensive or comes with a lot of costs. So why does Google still index 400 million pages for the subject apple pie? If I were Google, I would already have deleted, I think, like 90% of it. 10 million pages about apple pie should also be sufficient, right? So I have not been working for the traditional way we do SEO for years now, because I just don't believe in it anymore. I don't believe that with finding a keyword, writing content for that specific keyword, we can rank high enough. Markets are crowded. In almost every market, there are like 5 big players, and they own pretty much the search results for the most important keywords. So I have found myself another way of working, and I'm going to explain it for this case. This case is from De Jong & Laan. It's an accountancy agency in the Netherlands, and they're one of the smaller ones. They started from a local origin, and it was actually quite funny that when they came to me in October last year, they had the question, how can we create just good content that is good enough for SEO, but content that we can also reuse for other channels? And actually quite funny that in February, one of the independent online marketing agencies noticed while doing research for accountancy agencies that De Jong & Laan was actually quite performing very well. And I'm going to talk about this case, what I have done. What you can see here, and I translated some of the important things they're saying. they focused on companies outside the big four. So Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, because those are very big and depending on branded traffic. So they said, we're going to focus on others outside these four. And then they have a list of 5 brands, agencies that are doing quite good in SEO. And on number 2, you see my client, De Jong & Laan. And what they also say is Alpha attract a lot of branded traffic, and De Jong & Laan increased by attracting non-branded traffic. So my other way of doing SEO can very well lead to great results. And I think this case already proves it. This is the moment where they came to me and we created a very nice content strategy. And you see what happened after that the line is increasing in traffic. But I have another client case, it's Andros, and they are focusing on prostate and everything that has to do with the prostate. They are actually already quite an authority. They are very much in front of the market. They are in front of the research. They have other research methods than in hospitals. So they are not just the clinic just around the corner. And this is the moment when they came to me. And this is what happens with the visibility on keywords. What you see in traffic for Andros is that the traffic did not increase that much as we saw with De Jong & Laan. Because with Andros clinics, they have a lot of competition from the people also ask. So how do I recognize prostate cancer? Things around the PSA, which is a very important thing that matters when it comes to prostate. They're all answered by Google. So we are attracting more visibility. We are making ourselves more visible, but we are not yet getting the traffic out of it. But we are also not declining. When you're looking in SEMrush, you see it happening. We are very stable and slightly growing. So I think for this market, where we are under so much pressure of the people also ask, we are actually doing a good thing. And I think you want to know what the secret to my way of working is. And I'm going to disclose it in this session. This is what most people are focusing on. It's the data we see in keyword tools. You see the ice rock, which I created for my book last year, which I published. It's on the cover of the book. And the things you see above the water is keyword tools. It's what everyone uses, but also answer the public. That kind of tools, everything that's publicly available is these kind of tools. But I think there is more to understand when it comes to creating content, when it comes to understanding your client or your visitor. And that's what happens below the sea level, what happens what we can't see. And this is where we need to get to know our customer. It's the information that is just not publicly available. Because the information that is publicly available, everyone uses it. For example, SEMrush or Ahrefs or other keyword tools. I think there are like 5-6 major tools. And I think you can say that 80-90% of the market is using those tools. So if you want to be found in Google and you want to create other kind of content, you have to get to know your client. And this is the traditional way we do SEO. We start with keyword research. We find a keyword, we think of an angle, we start writing, optimizing, and then start tracking rankings. I think this way of working is outdated, especially when you're looking at the developments we see in Google. Google wanting more quality. Google saying that they cannot index it all anymore. The thing that we're all working the same way. And now they are discovering hidden gems. So we have to find another way of working. And I think this unpronounceable word is actually how we should work. So it stands for the questions, the problems, anxieties, fears, frustrations, concerns, goals, myths, interests and misunderstandings. Everything that matters to your client. What do they want to know? In what situation are they? What things matter to them when they are in this situation? What kind of questions do they have about the situation, about the use of your product? What kind of things did they hear but not understand well? What kind of myths are going around for your product or product group? I think that's all very interesting topics to cover with your content, but not that much people are focusing on this complete part when it comes to what your client wants to know. And here you see a kind of a model I created myself. I call it the content onion. And in the core of the content, you can find the information from keyword tools. So you will see a content onion I created for my jobs magazines, vacancies. And in the core, you find information from keyword tools. So that means part-time job in Amsterdam, full-time job in Amsterdam, maybe like call center employee job Amsterdam. That kind of information that's obviously coming from keyword tools. But people want to know more. When it comes to vacancies, people also want to know, what is the job about? What is related to what I want to know? How does my day look? What am I doing all day? What are other people doing all day? But it's also around the profession. How do I get there? What kind of education do I need? What kind of experience do I need to become this kind of, and then the job. But a lot of people maybe also are thinking about, how can I develop myself? How can I make a next step in my career? Or maybe they're thinking about, and that's already the 5th layer, do I need to start a completely new education or study something really different and re-educate myself to something different because I don't want to do that job anymore? And then we have some people dreaming about their future, to become maybe independent or start their own company in the future, or start their own beauty practice in the future. So there are a lot of layers where people are always thinking about when people are wanting to buy something or do something that's not an independent stage. It comes with a lot more. And I think all the questions, problems, anxieties, fears, frustrations, the concerns, the goals, the myths, interests and misunderstandings are through all these layers available, and people do have them across all these layers. So we cannot ignore them, because keyword tools don't come up with them. Keyword tools come up with keywords, with most of the time also short tail keywords. They don't come up with what your client wants to know. They are not client research investigation tools. They are just keyword tools. So we need to take a step further and think about getting to know our client. And that is what I did with De Jong and Laan. I had the 2 content employees coming over to my house to create our content strategy. But before we could do that, I gave them some homework. And that is, get to know your client. I explained why we need to have this information so they understand why we are doing this. I said to them what kind of information we need. We created these kind of persona files. And I said, go inside your company. Talk to people who have actually contact with your client, your audience you're focusing on, but also try to get in touch with the client itself. See if you can schedule an interview, ask some questions, get more information, try to understand them, and ask everything you really want. Be interested in your client. And then before we started, we had a short call again to see what they actually found and if that was enough to, in 1 day or 2 days, completely create a content map. So it was not yet completely enough what they found. They were like 90%. So we had a feedback round. I said, okay, you're missing this kind of information. Go back in the company, find these other parts of information. And then when you have it, come over here and we start working together. And what we did, you can see on this Instagram story, which I created with the results. We created a timeline. And some people call it a customer journey, but I don't call it a customer journey anymore, because I see people getting confused when we're talking about customer journeys. Is it see? Is it think? What kind of KPIs should I use? What kind of channels belong in this kind of the customer journey, in this phase? So I say just make it like a timeline. Here you still see, think, do, care. But after I removed it and just made a timeline with 0, the moment suprême, where people are converting, and we started to create the timeline to that point, towards that point. So all the questions we have written down on Post-its and paste them on the timeline. And we saw, okay, if you are on moment 1 and you have this question, and on moment 4 you have this question, is that correct? And are there any questions between those two? Isn't it strange that you come from question 1 to question 2? Are we not missing anything? And then we started to rearranging all the Post-its and also filling in blank gaps, which we didn't have inside, things we didn't know. So we came up with a very interesting content plan and an overview of all the questions, the problems, you know, the riddle that their client has. And we have also collected the content items they already have, also put them right there in the timeline so we can see, okay, they have this question, we already have this content item. But we also have apparently a lot of gaps around this. So after 2 days, this was the result, a complete overview of the customer journey, of questions people have, and the content team getting the right content for those actual informational needs. And we also said, if there is no keyword volume, just write, because we have researched it. We have found qualitative data. People are searching for this kind of information. They have this kind of question. So write about it, even if there's no search volume according to tools. So here you see we created a timeline with post-its and we filled in the content gaps that we had. And that's also the way of working I did with Andros. It's very similar. And what you see here from the traditional way of working of SEO, this is from a Dutch saying, we call it a monkey with a golden ring. It means that you can optimize as much as you want and make it a golden ring. In the foundation is still a monkey because it's SEO content. And that's also what it is. If the foundation is not good enough, you can optimize as much as you want. But everyone is doing it. You cannot make it better and you cannot make it good enough for the times we're living in. So here you see my proposal for a new style of doing SEO. It starts with getting to know your customer, selecting the QPAF, and then find experts with knowledge. And that's also what we did with De Jong en Laan, because it's about tax, it's about accounting. I don't know anything. I cannot create good content for actually in-depth questions about financial situations or how to act when it comes to tax questions or problems. So, and this is where the old way of SEO would have probably done it themselves. They go online, find information, rewritten it, and published it on the website. No, go and talk with the expert that can really help the potential client. We cannot help it. With that information, we started to create content. Afterwards, we did some check in keyword tools. Do we need to find other words? Are there better words with more search volume that we can use? Then optimize it and then track results, which results is bigger than rankings and traffic and conversions. But we're facing another problem. It's 2023. We have all seen the birth of ChatGPT, and that makes it even a bigger problem because we are used to just having the content, and having the content would be good enough to rank or to at least participate in our ranking competition. But in these new times, everyone can create content with just, in 10 seconds, the ChatGPT creates content for you for every topic you want. So we can expect some kind of tsunami of really bad or at least mediocre content. And I think in times where everyone can create content, it's not about having the content anymore. It's just not enough anymore. It is becoming about something else. And this is actually the question. Who is Google going to show in their suggestions or as a source when everyone has it? Well, I think it's depending on this EEAT. Who is the expert in the industry? Who has first-hand experience? Who is the authority and who is trustworthy? Because they cannot just show any source over there. It's too big of a deal for them. The stakes are too high. When they are giving incorrect information or they are citing incorrect sources or shady sources, it will make them look bad. So they need to identify the EEAT in each industry. So if you want to rank in Google within the generative search experience, you have to make sure you are an EEAT. And just to make it extra clear, with creating content with ChatGPT, you are not becoming an EEAT because you are just rehashing what's already out there on the internet. You are not adding value. You're not adding your unique vision. You are not adding the nuances in every answer. So working with ChatGPT to create your content is not how you build EEAT. And what I already said, when generative search was announced by Google, people say, well, what happens to SEO? What is left for us? What kind of traffic can we expect? And they were also saying there is no reason to create great content anymore. And I think that's a shame, because it's not only for SEO. We're not creating content for SEO only. We should find another motivation. We also have people just browsing on your website. We also need to inform them, help them make the best choice. But we also need to go out there, proactively find our client. What I'm doing right now is also creating content. I'm not doing this for SEO. I am doing this to proactively get in touch with people out there that are interested in my story. I am turning this into a video. I'm turning this into a podcast. I'm making posts out of it for LinkedIn. And that's also a reason we need the content. And once we have that content, we can reuse it on our website and optimize it for SEO. But then your website becomes some kind of a digital archive where people can find it if they're searching for you. But let's get back to that complete EEAT story. There is another reason why it's very, very important to become an EEAT. And it has to do with the 400 million recipes example. As I already said, indexing is not free. Indexing is actually quite expensive for Google. And we can imagine there comes a point where Google says, I'm not going to index all that crappy content that you guys are creating. So if Google needs to decide from who it is indexing the content, it works for you when you are an EEAT. In this example, imagine you're Gordon Ramsay, or imagine you're just a nobody writing recipes from your house and not having that much reach online and not a brand name. Who would Google index? Whose content would Google index when it comes to this example? And I think we all agree that when Google has to choose, they would choose for the apple pie recipe from Gordon Ramsay and not the apple pie recipe from just a nobody. And this is why it's very, very, very important to become an EEAT. First of all, to rank, but I think second of all, in the future, you need it to eventually become even indexed at all. So if you want to have success in SEO in the future, you not only need to have the content, you also need to be an EEAT. Having the content is not enough anymore. And in a lot of Dutch Facebook groups or fora, I see questions from people that are saying, well, I've given myself a new affiliate website. I just launched it and I created a lot of content already, but nothing is happening. Google is not really indexing it and it's not attracting any traffic. And I think, come on, people, it's 2023. Everyone has this content. Everyone is creating it. And with ChatGPT, it has never been easier to create textual content in just a few minutes. So having the content is not enough. It matters who the source is. And that is what brings you traffic, or at least visibility in SEO. Because I think we also have a very interesting point to touch. And that is, how attractive is SEO as a source for us? But we get back to it at a later time. But about helpful content and EEAT, Google made it into Google Concepts. But I think they actually don't have anything to do with SEO originally. Not until Google at least turned them into SEO concepts. Because helpful content is already way older than SEO has ever been. In the Netherlands, we have a chain of supermarkets, and already before the 20th century, I think it's the 20th century, in 1990, 1995, they already had a magazine with recipes, with tips and tricks when cleaning your house, buying food or cooking dinner or meals. And that's so old, but that was already a good example of helpful content. That was offline helpful content. Creating online videos has always been helpful content. The small retailer where you can go to that can ask or answer all your questions is helpful content. But I don't know where it happened, but with the internet, we never bothered to create that kind of content. We created a website, we put our products on it, and when we needed content, we only created it for the sake of SEO. And we maybe killed content, and Google has kind of relived it again to make sure, or saying that we need to create helpful content. And also EEAT is nothing really new. Also in just the outside world, the offline world, it matters who the source is. If the Cancer Society is saying you should wear sunscreen, or some organization is saying, no, you don't have to, everything will be fine. Who do you trust? Probably you will trust the Cancer Society because they are an authority. They know, they have the knowledge, they did research. So also being an authority is older than SEO, and now has Google turned them into SEO concepts. But that's also making it a problem because these things are actually bigger than you can expect from an SEO department. I think it's too much asked from them. And that's why I say we should find another motivation to create content, another motivation to build up EEAT. And when we succeed in this part, SEO will be the result. Visibility in SEO will be the result of doing the good things that also Google is asking from us. But as I already said in an earlier podcast, because Google is asking it, it ends up on the SEO's plate. And that is not where it belongs or where it should be. And I already mentioned it shortly. What will remain of SEO when Google will introduce the generative search experience to everyone? Of course, there will always be some kind of SEO traffic below and results and of course linking here. But we are used to getting endlessly amounts of traffic out of Google, and I think that is going to change. I think we will never ever have that same amount of traffic anymore as we had the last couple of years or every year up to now. And that makes me wonder, if we only create content for SEO, we cannot make a business case out of it. We cannot say, okay, it's a search volume of 8,000 with a CTR of 20% and a conversion rate of 1% and an average order value of 50 euros. We will get this out of this. Because I think the CTR of 20%, I don't have that much faith in it anymore that it will be that way. So that's also why I say find another reason to create content. And I think we should transform from this ugly frog of traditional SEO into actually organic marketing. Because when we are writing content around the question, problems, anxieties, fears, frustrations, everything, and when you turn that content into podcasts, videos, short videos, maybe TikTok shorts or a magazine, you are not doing SEO anymore. You're actually doing organic marketing. And you can turn that content later on into content for your website. Like what I'm doing right now, I'm also turning this into a blog. I'm adding the transcript. I will ask ChatGPT to create a blog article out of my transcript, not out of nothing with its own knowledge, but based on my knowledge and my input. And then it can help me. And then you're using ChatGPT a whole other way to create great content with still a unique vision. And once we are working according this way, we are not creating content for SEO. We are creating content to get reach, to build up an audience online. And when we are turning it into website content, we can do, again, the keyword tools. We can check, find the best keywords, optimize it, and track the results. And these results are way bigger than only rankings and traffic and conversions, because we also need to look at reach. How many people have listened to my podcast, have seen my videos? Do people know my name? Is my brand name search in Google Trends going up? Do I get more branded traffic to my website? I think that's a very, very underrated KPI, because we have always been fixating on non-branded search traffic, which is of course important. It's new traffic. It's people that don't know you, but it's also like accidentally traffic, people that accidentally found your website. And with organic marketing, you can make sure that people intentionally find your website, find your company. So it's a whole other approach where SEO, of course, is a logical result, because when you work according this way, you will build EEAT outside of Google, but Google will understand it because it will be turned into online EEAT. And I can give my own example. When I wrote my book last year, people were buying my book. They started to write reviews on their own website about my book. They started linking to my product page, not because it was just the next book on SEO. my book was already about why we should stop how we work now and start implementing a new way to SEO. So it was quite a unique sound at that moment. My podcast is the same. People are finding my podcast and are writing on it online and are linking to it or are talking about it, which proves to Google, oh, people are writing about Chantal's book, about her podcast. She's writing for Marketing Facts, Dutch magazines. Maybe she is an authority. This is how I am doing it. And it also results in great links to my website. But I think it's even more important that it's adding up to my entity, becoming an entity. And by becoming an entity and having great content, that is what SEO will be in the future. So this is the Prince Charming, which I think we should transform the ugly frog into. And what you see here is, especially for my Dutch viewers, very interesting. I think when you're watching my video from the United States, you will know this, you have seen this, but in the Netherlands we have a completely different search result page. You can see it in the upper left corner. We only have listers, like 10, 15 listers below each other. But when we're looking at the United States, we see that Google's also showing other kinds of content. TikTok shorts, YouTube shorts, just normal YouTube video, informational content. And what we are doing in the Netherlands is when we found, for example, the keyword jeans, we are creating a page and optimizing it for jeans. But Google is showing like informational content, how to wear your jeans. Jeans for women above 40. I also didn't know that was a thing. But Google is showing all kinds of content for a topic. So don't focus on website content alone. Focus also on the TikTok and the YouTube part of it, which helps you build authority, which is part of organic marketing. And it will help you become visible in Google on very important queries as well. So I think we should transform from SEO to actually organic marketing, where SEO is a result. And it brings us back to where we started, that content shouldn't be the responsibility of the SEO department, because we are writing for search engines and we need to create content for the visitor. And it should be in the DNA of the company, because if it's not in your DNA, I see it happen, it's very hard to actually create that great content, because companies are asking, when do I get visitors? How much traffic do I get out of this? What will it bring in revenue? But it's actually bigger. You cannot say, we're going to build EEAT, but only if it brings me this amount of money, or if I have a business case, what it will bring to me. This is not how it works. And when it's not in your DNA to create great content, to share your knowledge, to help your customer or your audience, you will face very hard times in SEO. And what I think how we should approach the way of content is that we should have a separate content department that is always looking after the story. So, for example, when you sell ovens online, that content department is going to talk to people in the culinary industry. How to choose an oven, what kind of oven would you advise? What do you think is important in an oven? Which oven do you prefer? Do you have brand preference? And like make that a video or a podcast or a recording for Instagram, for TikTok, for YouTube. And then you can turn that information into textual content on your website, embed the videos next to it. And that is when you actually become the EEAT. And then the content department is completely separate, responsible for the story, the information, and the content that we are sharing. And the other channels can reuse it. So they're building a kind of a library, and the other channels are finding in that library the information they need for their channels. And I think this is the only way to become the Gordon Ramsay in your market and survive in SEO. And for this, you need some things. Of course, you need to know your client, the content onion, all the layers where their questions are. You need to find the actual things that matters to them. You need to talk to your co-workers, your colleagues. What kind of information do they have? Do they talk with the client? What do they know about the client? You should have the experts, and you especially need a separate content department to schedule interviews, to create the content. And of course, you need to get time and budget from C-level. And I think this is really, really the hardest part, to convince C-level of the urgency of changing the approach to SEO. And I think they only will be convinced with cases. So this is what I'm going to do, building cases, so I can convince and persuade CEOs to have another look at SEO, another look at creating content and why we should eventually create it. And I hope one day we all see the value of actually good content and not just for SEO. So if you want to know more, unfortunately it's all in Dutch. It's my book, the e-magazines, the training and Instagram. For podcasts, I'm creating more and more in English nowadays. But this is it. Maybe if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can also find me there. And I want to thank you very much for looking this video.